Welcome to my channel, and enjoy watching. High above 40,000 feet, a pilot had just 12 minutes of fuel left and 12 lives hanging in the balance. What followed was a death-defying dive into a canyon no jet was ever meant to enter, unleashing the fury of the A-10 Warthog against impossible odds. Most people don't think of 40,000 feet as a place where decisions are made. But that's where I was, cruising high above an expanse of nothing, the kind of classified zone you don't admit exists, watching the instruments flicker when it came through. Any aircraft. This is Ranger Team Echo. We're boxed in, 200 hostiles, low ammo, casualties mounting. Immediate air support required. Or we're done. 12 minutes of fuel left. That number haunted me. 12 minutes. That's all the time I had before I'd have to break off and pray someone else could make the call. But below, inside a canyon twisted tighter than a rifle barrel, a dozen elite soldiers were about to die if someone didn't thread the impossible. My name's Captain Adrienne Wolfe. I fly the A-10 Thunderbolt II. Most folks call it the Warthog. Ugly, mean, stubborn as sin, but it gets the job done when angels won't fly. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I dropped the nose. As I dove, my mind ran calculations like it always does. Altitude, speed, angle, fuel burn. But it wasn't math driving me. It was instinct. That team didn't need numbers. They needed firepower. And I had 1,174 rounds of GAU, 8 Avenger Justice, strapped to my wings. I keyed the mic, Ranger Echo. This is Blaze 1 to 7. For minutes out. Hang tight. Silence, then a burst of static. Blaze 1 to 7. God, we hear you. We're pinned inside a 200-meter canyon, sealed from the north. They're coming from east, west, south. For men down, too critical. Ammo's damn near dry. I dropped from 40,000 feet to 20,000 in seconds. The ground was a jagged nightmare. Ridges like blades, ravines that swallowed light. It was terrain no sane pilot would enter. But sanity doesn't mean much when 12 people are waiting for death. Smoke going out. Mark in 3, 2, 1. I scanned the ridges. There it was, thin tendrils of orange smoke, curling from the floor of a canyon so narrow I couldn't believe it fit a team. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just tight. It was a coffin built by nature. I called it in. Control, this is Blaze 1 to 7. Troops in contact. Danger close fire mission, coordinates locked. Blaze 1 to 7, you are cleared hot. But be advised, no charts, severe hazard. You're on your own. Fuel at minimum. Make it fast. Copy, control. Blaze going in. I armed the GAU-8. Flipped the selector to armor-piercing incendiary. Push the stick. The first run would be the East Ridge. I saw them. Fighters lined in dug-in positions, muzzle flashes blinking like fireflies in the dusk. The approach was madness. Sheer cliffs on either side, stone pillars rising like spears. I dipped below 8,000, then 6,000, then 4,000. At 2,000 feet, I pulled the trigger. The Avenger came alive. The sound isn't something you hear, it's something you feel in your bones. A primal roar. A death cry born of depleted uranium and American resolve. 65 shells per second shredded the ridge. Rock exploded. Guns disappeared. I counted to 3, 195 rounds, and banked out hard. A voice came through. Blaze 1 to 7, this is Echo. Direct hit. East side's breaking. Can you swing west? I'm already moving. I looped over the canyon, hit the west side. This one was tighter, closer to the team. I had to weave between spires like I was dancing with the devil. One mistake, and I'd be a fireball. But I didn't miss. Another burst. 3 seconds. Another 195 rounds. I watched a fuel dump ignite, sent a fireball 50 feet high. West is clear. Someone screamed. South Ridge, last heavy position. Can you do one more? Fuel was critical. Gauges screamed at me. But I still had one last burst to give. 5 minutes to bingo, I said. One last run. Get low and stay down. I pulled the nose around for a final strike. This time, through the valley itself. Through the eye of a needle. I threaded stone canyons at 400 knots, alarms blaring, my hands steady. And when I fired, I emptied hell itself into that ridge. I came in low. So low the altimeter started howling like it had lost its mind. Terrain warnings, stall warnings, fuel alarms. They were all screaming at me in a mechanical chorus of doom. But I shut them out. I had one job left. The southern ridge was the enemy's stronghold. I could see them as I came in, flickers of motion behind rock, gun barrels catching the light, shoulder-fired missiles on the ready. They had set the trap perfectly, but they hadn't counted on a Warthog coming straight through the canyon floor. I spotted the opening, a gap barely wider than my wingspan, no more than 10 feet of air to spare. I lined it up, nose level, breath steady. And I went through. The wind clawed at me. Stone flashed past my canopy, so close I could count the mineral veins. I came out of the gap like a bullet from a barrel, and the southern ridge was dead ahead. I squeezed the trigger. The cannon roared for 9 full seconds, 3 bursts back to back. Nearly 600 rounds of depleted uranium fury. The effect was apocalyptic. Stone bunkers disintegrated. Vehicles cooked off. Munitions caches lit up like fireworks. For a moment, the entire ridge turned into a sun. And then I pulled up. Hard. I didn't know if I was going to make it. My airspeed dropped. The canyon walls loomed. My bird groaned under the strain. The stick fought me like it wanted to let go, but I didn't let it. I cleared the last ridge with barely 100 feet of altitude left. My hands were shaking. My jaw clenched so tight it felt wired shut. But I was alive, and the valley was silent. I keyed the mic. Echo, Blaze 1 to 7. I'm Winchester on gun. Bingo fuel. I've got to break off. Can you move? Static for a second. Then the reply came through. Blaze 1 to 7. This is Echo Team. Enemies are in retreat, scattering like rats. All ridges are clear. You just saved 12 lives. We're extracting now. Thank you doesn't even cover it. I exhaled, a breath that felt like it had been stuck in my lungs for a year. Stay safe, Echo, I said. Blaze 1 to 7 returning to base. Climbing out of that valley was like crawling out of hell. My fuel was low enough to make the engine sputter when I leveled off. The display showed I had maybe a minute or two of flight time left before I dropped like a rock. Still, my hands were steady. I'd made it out. So had they. Back at the forward base, the runway shimmered in the afternoon heat. I called in, got clearance, and came in hot. No time for a textbook landing. I dropped onto the tarmac with a jolt, taxied to my spot, and killed the engine just as the gauges hit 0. 2 minutes of fuel left. Maybe less. I popped the canopy and climbed out, expecting the usual crew chief waiting, a quiet nod, maybe a grumble about the wear on the frame. Instead, there was a crowd. The whole damn maintenance crew, some officers, even the base commander, Colonel Ivana Drost, stood watching. My crew chief, Sergeant Bannon, looked at the A-10 like it had grown wings twice the size. Captain Wolfe, he said slowly, I'm going to need a full frame inspection. We heard the chatter. You flew through terrain designed to eat aircraft alive. The hogs built for punishment, I replied. Sure, he said, I still wide. But not that kind of punishment. Colonel Drost stepped forward, arms folded. Captain Wolfe, she said. That was the single most aggressive flying I've ever seen outside of combat footage from the Gulf. You just rescued 12 elite operatives who were 5 minutes from death. Thank you, ma'am, I said, standing at attention. Just doing my job. She tilted her head. No, Captain, that wasn't just your job. That was suicidal, brilliant, unorthodox, and terrifying. Which means 2 things. You'll probably get a medal, or a hearing. Maybe both. She wasn't joking. Within the hour, I was in a debriefing room with intelligence officers, flight analysts, and a few grim-faced brass from command. They wanted every detail, angles, weapon burst counts, altitudes, even wind data. One of the intel guys spoke up, flipping through a report. Preliminary analysis says you eliminated at least 140 enemy combatants in that strike. The remaining hostiles scattered before contact could resume. Echo Team exfiltrated safely. All wounded are stable and en route to surgical. I nodded, taking that in. All 12 were alive. That's what mattered. By the time the debrief wrapped, I was running on fumes. Not just the aircraft, but me. Mentally. Physically. Every part of me wanted to shut down. But I still had to write my after-action report. Protocol. I was in the ready room, trying to make sense of what I'd just done when the door opened. 12 men walked in. They were dirty, bruised, patched, and limping, but alive. All 12 members of Echo Team. Their leader stepped forward, a tall man with haunted eyes and the rank insignia of a lieutenant commander. I'm Commander Malik Garrison, he said. Echo team leader. I stood, caught off guard. We wanted to meet the pilot who pulled us out. There was a pause. The kind that hangs heavy when people don't know what to say because what happened wasn't supposed to be possible. You saved us, he said finally, voice rough. We heard you on the net. Heard the way you dove into that canyon. We were flat on the ground thinking it was over. Then we heard the GAU-8 spin up. He shook his head slowly, like even now he didn't fully believe it. I've worked with dozens of pilots, but I've never seen anyone choose to come into the valley with us. Most keep their distance. Most keep safe. You came into our hell with your wings wide open and your cannon hot. One of the others stepped forward, name patch reading Vasquez. You didn't just deliver firepower, ma'am. You delivered presence. Hope. And that made all the difference. When your rounds started tearing up the ridges, we knew we weren't dying in that valley. They gathered around me. All of them. Bruised warriors who'd stared down death. And then Malik reached into his vest and pulled out something I never expected to see. A trident. The symbol of naval special warfare. It's not just a badge. It's a brotherhood. He held it out to me. This is from all of us. You earned it. I hesitated. I can't take that. I didn't go through BUD/S. I'm not one of you. No, he said quietly. But you flew into hell when you didn't have to. That makes you family. And around here, family is blood. I took the pin, hands trembling. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt it hit my flight suit. Then Vasquez grinned and said, "You've got a call sign now." "Oh," I asked, wiping at my face. "Yeah, we talked about it. Decided together." Malik nodded. "From now on, you're Valkyrie." That name hit me like a bolt of lightning. The Valkyries of Norse legend, choosing who lived and who died in battle. And I had chosen. I'd chosen for them to live. "Valkyrie," I repeated quietly. "It fits," said one of the others. "You dropped from the sky like a myth. And because of you, we get to go home." We sat in silence for a while. Nothing needed saying. The kind of bond forged under fire doesn't need words. When they finally stood to go, I rose too. Malik paused at the door and said, "You ever fly with us again, Valkyrie, we'll know we're getting out alive." Then they were gone. But I stood there holding the trident pin, a weight far heavier than its size. Because it wasn't just a medal. It was trust. And that's something you never earn with just rank. You earn it by flying through valleys that kill, just so others don't have to die in them. 3 days passed. I expected things to go back to normal. Flight checks, patrol routes, maybe some paperwork explaining why my A-10 needed a structural overhaul. What I didn't expect was a summons to the base command office with the words, "Report immediately, dress uniform." When I walked in, I found Colonel Drost at attention. And behind her desk stood a woman I'd never seen before, tall, composed, with stars on her shoulders. 2 of them. Captain Adrienne Wolfe, the colonel said. "This is Major General Clarissa Dale, Air Combat Command." My breath caught. A 2-star general? Out here? This wasn't protocol. This was personal. "At ease, Captain," the general said. "Have a seat." I did, nerves wired tight. "I've reviewed the gun camera footage from your mission," she said, getting straight to it. "I've also read the SEAL team's debrief, your own report, the structural stress analysis on your aircraft, and the testimonies of 6 senior pilots who reviewed the maneuver data." She paused, eyes locked on mine. "The consensus is mixed. Some are calling it the most masterful display of close air support in modern history. Others say it was reckless beyond comprehension." She stepped around the desk and set a tablet in front of me. It showed a 3D model of my flight path. "You flew through terrain that doctrine says is unflyable. You pulled G-forces the hog wasn't meant to sustain. You burned your cannon dry and landed with fumes in the tank." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure I could. "But you also saved 12 lives. Neutralized an enemy force of nearly 150. And redefined what we thought a Warthog could do in terrain like that." Then her tone shifted, softer. "Captain Wolfe, you're being awarded the Air Force Cross." I blinked. "Ma'am?" "The second highest decoration we can give," she said, "for extraordinary heroism in combat. And you've earned it." I couldn't breathe. "And that's not all," she continued. "Effective immediately, you're promoted to major and reassigned to the A-10 Weapons School at Nellis." I finally found my voice. "You want me to teach? I want you to show others what you showed us, that the hog still matters." That bravery isn't just in the manual. It's in the heart that flies it. She pinned the insignia on me herself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift in my bones. Not pride, not relief, but purpose. The promotion ceremony happened 2 days later. They flew my parents in from Spokane, Dad in his worn Air Force Reserve hat, Mom clutching tissues before the first speech even started. Colonel Drost stood beside General Dale. In front row, in full gear and freshly pressed uniforms, were the 12 ghosts I'd pulled from that canyon. Echo Team. When the general pinned those oak leaves onto my collar, something changed in the air. It wasn't just ceremony. It wasn't pomp or military tradition. It was weight. The kind that comes with being trusted to lead others into hell and back. When the Air Force Cross was presented, the citation was read aloud. The words felt like they were written about someone else. For extraordinary heroism and courage under fire, executing danger-close air support in terrain deemed unflyable, responsible for the survival of 12 U.S. Special Operations personnel. My hands didn't stop shaking, but I held it together until after the pictures, the handshakes, the claps on the back, until Malik Garrison approached me with a quiet grin. "You're a legend now," he said. "Every SEAL team in theater knows your name." "That's a hell of a rumor mill," I smirked, trying to play it off. "Not rumor," he said. "Reputation. They call you Valkyrie. And if you're overhead, they know they're making it home." He paused, looked me dead in the eye. "That's not something any drone or smart missile can ever do. It takes a human being. One with guts. One who'll break the rules when the rules aren't enough." We didn't talk about medals or promotions. We talked about responsibility. About what it meant when people on the ground knew you'd come for them, even if it meant threading the impossible. Later that night, back in my quarters, I finally let myself breathe. I stared at the Air Force Cross on my desk, at the trident pinned beside it, and for the first time since the mission, I let it hit me. What I'd done, what I'd risked, and what I'd be expected to do again. Because medals don't mark the end of a journey. They mark the beginning of a heavier one. 6 months later, I stood in front of a classroom at Nellis Air Force Base, staring at a room full of Warthog pilots, seasoned, scarred, and skeptical. These weren't rookies. These were combat-tested aviators training to become weapons officers, the instructors of the next generation. I looked at them and said, "Today's topic is terrain-denied close air support." That got their attention. Specifically, I continued, we're going to break down a mission flown in an unmapped canyon, with a SEAL team trapped below and 200 hostiles pressing in. Doctrine said fixed-wing aircraft couldn't survive in that valley. But we went anyway. I queued up the footage. My footage. The gun camera lit the screen, the valley walls flashing by inches from the wings, the sights locking onto dug-in fighters, the GAU-8 roaring in that guttural, thunderous cry. When it ended, the room was dead silent. "This mission broke nearly every rule," I said. "Altitude minimums, angle of attack, fuel safety margins, terrain avoidance procedures." I paused, scanning the room. But 12 Americans are alive today because someone was willing to accept that failure was worse than death. A hand went up. "Ma'am, how did you know you could make it through that canyon? At those speeds, at that altitude?" "I didn't," I said honestly. "I studied it from altitude. I calculated the angles. I made the best judgment I could, and then I trusted my training, my aircraft, and the mission." Another pilot leaned forward. "What if you'd been wrong? Then I'd be dead. And so would they." It wasn't bravado. It was math. The room stayed quiet for a beat too long. Then another voice asked, "How do you know when to break the rules?" That was the question, and it deserved more than a canned answer. "You have to know 3 things," I said. "Your aircraft's limits, your own limits, and the tactical stakes. The Warthog isn't fast. It isn't stealthy, but it was built to fly low, take punishment, and deliver fire where others can't. But that only works when the pilot is willing to get close, to share the risk." I tapped the screen, pulling up the terrain profile of that canyon. "Let's break this down, run by run. Starting with the eastern ridge. I came in from the west using a rock formation as my altitude anchor. Here's why. And for the next 4 hours, I took them step by step through every decision I'd made: fuel management, wind drift, burst duration, terrain masking, and risk calculation. They asked hard questions, the kind only experienced pilots ask, and I gave them hard answers. Because this wasn't about theory. This was about reality. That day, and many after, I taught them more than numbers and tactics. I taught them what it meant to bring salvation from the sky, to be the one sound ground troops pray to hear when death is closing in. I taught them to be Warthog pilots, not just by training, but by heart. At Nellis, they called it the Cathedral. It wasn't official, just a nickname for Hangar 19, where the A-10 instructors trained the next generation. But for us, it was sacred ground, where pilots learned not just how to fly, but how to carry the burden that came with flying close to death, close to the men on the ground. My office was modest. A desk, a worn leather chair, a tactical map pinned to one wall, and two things that always caught visitors' eyes. The trident, framed and hung in a shadow box. And next to it, a photo of Echo Team, 12 men, dust-covered and grinning like they'd cheated the Reaper. Below it, a handwritten quote, tacked up by one of my students. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the judgment that something else matters more than fear. Every time I looked at that wall, I remembered the mission, the valley, the screams over the radio. The second I chose to dive when doctrine said to climb, I hadn't just survived that day. I'd changed. And that meant something, especially to the new pilots coming through. They wanted to know what it took to be a Warthog pilot in the truest sense. Not just technically proficient, but willing to do the impossible when it mattered. I didn't sugarcoat it. This jet isn't glamorous, I told them. You won't break speed records. You won't dodge radar. What you'll do is fly low enough to see the fear in the enemy's eyes, and fire close enough that the soldiers down there remember your name for life. I made every student read the after-action report from my canyon run, not because I wanted them to idolize it, but because I wanted them to understand the mindset. No backup, no margin for error, no time to hesitate. Just you, your machine, and the knowledge that failure means American lives lost. CAS, I drilled into them, isn't about big kills or flashy strikes. It's about presence. It's about telling the guy on the ground, I'm here. I see you. I've got you. We ran simulations built around worst-case scenarios, GPS jamming, terrain masking, close-quarter fire missions with less than 50 meters to friendlies. Every time a student asked, is this realistic? I'd say the same thing. No, the real thing is worse. I didn't teach to scare them. I taught them to be ready. Because somewhere, someday, one of them would get a call like I did. One that came with 12 minutes of fuel and no room for mistakes. And when that moment came, I wanted them to have more than confidence. I wanted them to have conviction. 5 years after that day in the canyon, I was back in a cockpit. Not as an instructor, not as a guest speaker, but as a mission lead. The location was classified. The operation even more so. What I can say is that the terrain was as bad, if not worse, than the valley where I'd earned my call sign. Jagged cliffs, blind curves, and wind currents that played with aircraft like a child snapping paper planes. I led a flight of 4 A-10s, not one of them older than 30. Every single one had trained under me. We were called in by a special operations team pinned in a ravine, Phantom 1-1. Reports said they were taking fire from 3 elevated positions, low ammo, and mounting casualties. Sounded familiar. Valkyrie lead. This is Phantom 1-1, came the call. Request danger close support. We're boxed in. It's bad down here. I glanced down from altitude. Another valley. Another kill box. Another team hoping someone still flew old-school wings. This time, I wasn't the lone bird answering the call. I had a team. Phantom 1-1, Valkyrie lead. We've got your 6. Pop smoke and mark. Flight. Prepare for strike pattern delta. Staggered approach. Hard angle entry. The smoke rose. Orange again. Always orange. I dove first. The GAU, 8 roared. And behind me, so did 3 more cannons. We hit hard. 4 guns, for Warthogs, for pilots trained not just to follow doctrine, but to bend it when the mission demanded more. We cut through enemy positions with brutal efficiency. Burst, pull, climb, re-engage. My pilots flew with surgical aggression, just as I'd taught them. After the 3rd run, Phantom 1-1 came back on comms, their voice cracking from either the radio or sheer relief. Valkyrie, hostiles retreating. Casualties stabilized. You brought us home. I looked left and right, 3 birds flying tight with me in perfect formation. I didn't answer right away, because I was watching the sun cut across a ridge line, the same way it had all those years ago, in another valley that didn't exist on any map. Then I keyed the mic. That's what we're here for. Phantom. Call anytime. Back at base, I watched the Warthogs taxi in one by one, their fuselages coated in dust and scorched carbon streaks. The ground crew swarmed, checking tires, flaps, and cannon barrels that still radiated warmth. I shut down my engines and popped the canopy. Master Sergeant Brill, my newest crew chief, was already waiting at the ladder. "You really flew through that slot canyon at 420 knots?" he asked, blinking like I might have grown a second head. I gave him a tired smile. "Only way to make the pass and not give the hostiles time to adjust." He whistled and looked up at the bird. "This old girl's tougher than the manuals say." "No," I said, climbing down. "She just needs a pilot who trusts her." Later that night, I walked the flight line alone. The hangar lights cast long shadows. My boots echoed on the concrete, but it was the silence between each step that settled in deeper. I found myself back at the same spot I always returned to, beneath my A-10, tail number 682. The one I flew that first day. The one that came home with stress fractures and glory. Framed on the bulkhead of my office was a sound clip, an odd thing to hang. But for me, it meant everything. It was the GAU-8's audio waveform from that first canyon run. 3 bursts. 1 mission. 12 lives. It's a sound most people would call terrifying. A metallic scream that rattles bones and splits silence like thunder through steel. But to soldiers on the ground, it's the sound of salvation. Because when you're trapped, when the sky is falling, and when every second might be your last, the rip of a Warthog cannon isn't just firepower. It's the promise someone up there cares enough to come into the fire with you. That's why I fly. That's why I train others to do the same. Not for medals, not for recognition, but for the chance to be the answer when the radio hisses. Any aircraft. Because the next call will come, and someone will be down there, waiting, hoping, praying. The thing no one tells you is how quiet the cockpit gets before the first shot. The engines hum, the avionics chatter, but in those final seconds before you fire, there's a stillness. You're alone, above the chaos, above the pleading voices. Just you and the weight of a decision that might decide who lives and who doesn't. And every time, I hear that same question in my head. Will you go in? Because there's always an option to play it safe, to follow the manual, to stay high, conserve fuel, check the boxes, and let someone else take the risk. But the Warthog was never meant for that. And neither was I. Flying CS isn't about glory. It's about choice. And I chose long ago to be the one who goes in when others won't. I chose to fly below the line, to dive into terrain that eats faster jets alive, to roar low and loud so that someone in the dirt has a reason to hope. That's what Valkyrie means to me. Not a call sign, not a nickname, but a promise. A reminder that even when the odds say no one's coming, I am. And I'm not alone anymore. The flight school at Nellis now runs Valkyrie scenarios during training, simulated kill boxes, low-altitude strikes through near-death terrain. My students fly them like rituals, each one pushing the edge, each one understanding that heroism is never the absence of fear. It's what you do in spite of it. They fly better than I did that day. Faster, smarter, more precise. And I couldn't be prouder. Because I know the next time a SEAL team, or a Ranger unit, or a pair of Pin Marines cries out across the net for any aircraft, they won't just get steel and speed. They'll get a pilot who remembers the canyon, who remembers what I taught them, and who remembers what it sounds like when salvation thunders from the sky. So if you ever find yourself wondering what makes a hero, it isn't the medal, it isn't the rank. It's the one who answers the call, no matter how impossible the odds. It's the one who chooses to fly into the fire when no one else will. That's what I did. That's what I still do. Because in the darkest valleys, when the enemy presses from all sides and the world starts to go quiet, sometimes all it takes is a voice on the radio, and a woman with a Warthog, screaming down from the heavens with one message. You're not alone. Not today. Not on my watch. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.